Tick tock, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher here, and with me now is Dr. Michael Brown, who is, as I've heard, a Jew. So he might have a vested interest in all of this. Dr. Brown, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who's been living in a cave and doesn't know who you are?
Yes, I'm a Jewish follower of Jesus. God saved me in 1971, so almost 52 years ago, as a heroin shooting, LSD using hippie rock drummer. And since then, gotten to preach the gospel around the world, done tons of debates with rabbis in the Jewish community, and got a daily radio show, The Line of Fire, where we tackle the hot button issues. So the three R's of our ministry: revival in the church, gospel-based moral and cultural revolution in society, and redemption in Israel. So naturally, as a Jewish person and with so much of a heart for Israel, our hearts are torn right now by what's happening as the whole world looks at Israel. And of course, the reactions from people in the world are quite telling.
Yeah, all sorts of cats coming out of all sorts of bags recently. For everyone who hasn't been following Dr. Brown, there are links to his website and his YouTube channel and his Twitter page in the description box. All right. So also, if people have been have been living in a cave, I assume that almost everyone here is familiar with what's been going on. But why don't you give us the short version just to set up this discussion?
Right. So this past Saturday, Shabbat, was the culminating day of Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, what's called Simchat Torah in Jewish tradition, the joy of the Torah, rejoicing of the Torah. It is the most joyous day on the Jewish calendar. It's a time when, in Jewish tradition, the yearly reading of the Torah is completed. So you're celebrating the gift of the Torah to the nation. You're dancing in the streets for hours and hours, and it's quite a festive time. It was 50 years, almost to the day, that the Yom Kippur War took place in 1973. So, on the 25th anniversary of Israel, the first Shabbat, the first Saturday of October, there was a surprise attack on Israel led by Egypt, and it caught Israeli security totally off guard. This was a horrific parallel to that. Also, the first Shabbat of October, and now 50 years later, Hamas coming by land, by sea, by air, completely catching Israel off guard, an absolute shocking event, the way it happened, and well over 1,000 terrorists penetrating the southern border and wreaking mayhem. The death toll is up to about 1,300 wounded, over 3,000, roughly 150 kidnapped, taken hostage, and of course, people slaughtered in the most horrific ways. Uh, Pictures have now been released. Israel felt it was important to release the pictures so people could see the beheaded babies and the families burned alive. And of course, Hamas was putting out the videos joyously of the people being raped and all the bloody bodies and people being murdered in cold blood. To give this a context, though, this is the bloodiest day, Jewish slaughter, since the Holocaust. And if you think the Jewish population of Israel is about 7 million, roughly, and then USA is about 330 million. So the Jewish population of Israel is about 147th the population of America. When you look at it like that, this is roughly 20 times the casualties proportionately that we suffered 9/11. It would be putting the the number of injured, I mean, into the hundreds of thousands. It would be like 5, 6, 7,000 Americans kidnapped and taken hostage to Afghanistan. It's just absolutely devastating. 260 young people. It was a peace festival, a rave. And these are like the old hippies, peace, love, man, let's get along. 260 of them slaughtered in cold blood. The likes of this has never been seen in the modern state of Israel. It's the darkest day in the history of Israel. So, of course, Israel has now launched an all-out war on Hamas, determined to wipe Hamas off the map, basically. That also means terrible suffering for the people of Gaza, one of the most densely populated places in the world, 2.3 million people living in 150 square miles, the median age just 18, so a very, very young population. So Israel seeks to avoid civilian casualties, but there will be many civilian casualties. In the end, there'll be more Palestinian casualties than Israeli casualties. So it's just a terrible, tragic thing unfolding.
Yeah, I was wondering. I just posted a tweet on it as I was thinking about it early this morning. But sometimes I think with politicians that a politician will be elected because he's the one or she's the one who's promising to solve some problem. And sometimes I wonder if the people who are elected to solve some problem are actually interested in solving the problem. In other words, if you're put into power specifically because you're the one who's going to deal with this ongoing problem, is it really in your best interest to solve that problem? Because that's the reason, that's what's keeping you in power. And no, of course you can actually be a believer in solving that problem. So you could do it, even though, that could potentially put your political career out of business if you deal with the problems that you're supposedly trying to deal with. So it could be actually someone getting elected who wants to deal with the problem. It could also be a person who doesn't really care about the problem. It's just putting yourself forward as the solution keeps you in power. And I was wondering that about Hamas, because people are wondering, hey, why does Hamas want to launch these attacks when they know there's going to be this massive retaliation that's going to send buildings crumbling to the ground and so on? Why would Hamas want to do that, knowing about the inevitable retaliation? I started thinking, well, if Hamas's goal is actually destroy Israel at all costs, is it really in their best interest to make the lives of people in Gaza better? Because if you improve people's lives and they become more complacent and they're happy and they're focused on going to school and having careers and so on, they might not be as dedicated to launching terror attacks on Israel and then getting the retaliation. They would want to be, they would want to keep making progress and so on. But if you launch the attacks, you get the retaliation, buildings are bombed and people's lives are destroyed, well, now you've got the next generation of terrorists already there. So I always wonder if Hamas has any real concern for the people of Palestine versus just viewing them as tools in this larger agenda. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sadly, there's a lot of tragic truth to that. First, there's the mentality of radical Islam, as expressed by some: we love death more than you love life. So in this case, more death is a win, more death is a victory, because now Israel looks even worse. You think, how could Israel look bad after one of the most horrific slaughters, the most horrific thing we've ever lived through in terms of seeing the actual footage and so on? Well, all you have to do is have more Palestinian casualties, and now Israel again is the evil occupier. Let's remember that after the 1948 division of the state of Israel, so Gaza Strip, which then south of that, Sinai Peninsula, then Egypt. So that was all under the control of the Egyptians, and Egypt really didn't do anything to improve the lives of the people of Gaza. And many who had fled from the war within Israel were now there. So the population rising pretty quickly. Then after the Six-Day War, Israel takes control of the region. And then in 2005, pulls out. There are about 7,000 Israelis who were living there, 8,000. They had synagogues, they had businesses, they had farms and all that. Israel physically pulls them out and says, no, we're going to give this all over to the Palestinians for self-rule, for self-determination. So they pulled out. And then the next year, 2006, they had their elections, the one and only election, right? This is, the old slogan, one vote, one time. Mm-hmm. Well, this is what happens. They vote. And who do they vote for? Hamas. So Hamas, from its inception in 87, 88, has had one goal only, the elimination of Israel. And of course, most of your viewers would be familiar with this, but with the mindset of Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, so that territory which has been taken over by Islam and brought into submission to Allah, that's Dar al-Islam. But the world that is out from under that Dar al-Harb, that's in a state of war. Well, what happens if Islam ruled over an area and then it was taken back? Well, that's the ultimate reproach. That's the ultimate insult. It would be like someone running off with your wife or your children. That's the ultimate insult. What if it's the Jews? Well, that's the ultimate of all insults in that case. So Israel cannot exist. There has never been a desire for peace. When people chant, and you'll even have American protesters chant, And they think they're chanting a two-state solution, and they're saying from the river, meaning Jordan, from the river to the sea, Mediterranean, Palestine will be free. That means no Jews. That means they must be eliminated. So that has been Hamas's goal from day one. The original Hamas charter makes it explicit that Israel will only exist until Islam obliterates it, even quoting from a famous hadith that the end will not come until Islam fights successfully against the Jews, etc. So this is their mentality. So on the one hand, all those who died are now shaheeds, they're now martyrs. But as for the people who die, yeah, on the one hand, I'm sure there's humanitarian care. I mean, these are fathers and mothers and kids. They're human beings as horrifically as they acted. But on the other hand, the more casualties, the worse it looks for Israel. Ben Shapiro the other day referenced recordings, because Israel's got so much tap there, phone lines and things like that, that Israel is notifying Hamas before they bomb, get out of this building because we're about to bomb it and there's civilians in there. And they said, we want civilians in here. It's well known Hamas headquarters are under a hospital. And last point, Hamas puts out this ghastly video. It's an audio, but they put it out as a video. And they say, look, we are acting in accordance with Islamic law and protecting innocent life. And the people we have kidnapped, we're going to preserve. However, if you keep bombing us, we're going to execute them. And here's what they say. If you bomb without advance warning, we will execute. Well, who would ever say that in the war? But that's what Israel does. Israel gives advance warning, and Hamas, as the PLO did years back, will set up rockets right by an elementary school. So if Israel is going to defend itself, it's going to have to kill Palestinian civilians because of where they are, and that's a win. As crazy as it is, that's a win because now Israel looks even worse.
And so that's yet another reason, tying into what I was saying about people wondering why would Hamas do these attacks, knowing that the retaliation is going to make a lot of people's lives worse. Some people who just want to live their lives, and then their lives are suddenly worse. Why would they want to do that when they're the elected leaders who are supposed to be seeking the good of those people and working in their best interest? Well, if their goal never was the people's best interest, if everyone is merely a tool, then I don't know. You can see a kind of sick wisdom behind what they're doing. It's, hey, we set this in motion. The retaliation enrages our people more to keep us in power, and Israel, because of the retaliation, will look bad in the eyes of many people in the world who now condemn Israel for retaliating. So yeah, it's and then even kids, women killed in the retaliation. These are just viewed as they're all pawns. They're all pawns in this game.
And think of this: where in the world are they getting all the money for weapons? The people live in poverty. The infrastructure is broken down. There's so much rebuilding that needs to be done, so much more humanitarian work that needs to be done. And remember, Hamas has two arms to it. There is the humanitarian arm and there is the military arm. So the humanitarian arm, that they come in power, they help the people, they do lots of good things like that. And of course, it's popular and it's appreciated. And then the funding, the money comes pouring in and is used for weaponry, is used to build tunnels rather than to help the people. As this has been going on, it's exactly what you're saying, but it strikes me from another angle as well. The whole parable of the scorpion and the frog. Well, why did the scorpion bite the frog? Now they both die. Well, that's what scorpions do. So there's this certain madness, demonic madness to this, that when you hate that much, and when you're so filled with this demonic violence, you're going to do something, even if it's counterproductive practically, because you have an opportunity to do it. But then there is that demonic strategy that, the more we suffer, the better for our cause.
And you just wonder, like, what's the way out of this? Because they're going to be successful in causing these chaotic situations here, and I've heard that lots of these Hamas guys will send their kids off to other countries and stuff like that, so they get to live just fine elsewhere. And meanwhile, the destruction that they cause, it helps keep them in power. We want to get to discussing Christian reaction and why Christians should be concerned, but on the lines of You have anti-Semitism coming from a lot of different directions here, but the core of this dispute would be some teachings of Muhammad that seem to prevent or stand in the way of any sort of peaceful resolution. It keeps people obsessed with no. The only outcome that is acceptable here is the complete annihilation of the other side. There are tons and tons of passages that we could go to. I just wanted to bring up a couple and get your thoughts on any of this. So Surah 98, verse 6. Verily, those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran, and Prophet Muhammad from among the people of the scripture, so this is Jews and Christians here, and al-mushrikun, those are people who associate partners with Allah, so you could think of them as idolaters or something like that, polytheists, will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures. They are the worst of creatures. So here, Christians, Jews, and polytheists are all lumped together as the worst of creatures if you reject Muhammad. And you can compare this with Surah 3, verse 110 of the Quran, which says that Muslims are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind. And so you have this view, Muslims are the best of peoples, they're superior to everyone else. And then Jews are down here with Christians and polytheists as the worst of creatures. And so this situation, if you're looking at it from an Islamic perspective, is, wait a minute, the Jews seem way more powerful than us, at least they're capable of dominating us. And it just psychologically, it just seems like that's not the way that things are supposed to be.
Yeah, if Jews are, as other statements in Islam say, the descendants of apes and pigs, then how is it that they could be on sacred Islamic ground? I mean, the third holiest site in Islam, right, where allegedly Muhammad ascends to heaven from Jerusalem. How could this be? So it is an outrage.
Yeah, you have these passages in the Muslim sources about Allah transforming. And keep in mind, it's not all Jews. It's a group of Jews into apes and pigs and so on. What's interesting is you find these passages where Muhammad believed that they had been turned into something, but he wasn't sure which, and he's trying to actually figure it out. He's trying to figure out what Allah had transformed the Jews into. He eventually discovers that it's apes and pigs. But there are passages along the way where he's trying to figure it out. Like, so here's one. This is from Sunan Abu Dawud. We were in an army with the messenger of Allah. We got some lizards. I roasted one lizard and brought it to the messenger of Allah and placed it before him. He took a stick and counted its fingers. So he's counting the fingers on the lizard. He then said, a group from the children of Israel was transformed into an animal of the land, and I do not know which animal it was. He did not eat it, nor did he forbid its eating. So you have these passages where Muhammad is reluctant to eat a lizard because he's wondering if that's the animal that Jews were transformed into. And he's actually wondering if this lizard is a Jew. And so I don't want to accidentally eat this Jew here.
Yeah, look, here's the thing. You know that there are Muslims that would take these texts seriously and would say, yes, we believe in these things, and therefore there can never be peace with Israel. And that's why it was no surprise that Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, really the manufacturer of the first Intifada, late 1920s, early 1930s, that he became a confidant of Adolf Hitler. And that's why it's no surprise that there are Muslims in Sydney, Australia, at the Sydney Opera House earlier this week, chanting, "Gas the Jews." Notice it would have been barbaric, horrific, mind-boggling, sick enough after this atrocious slaughter of innocent people in Israel. It would have been mind-boggling, beyond sick, if they were chanting, "Gas the Israelis." No, but that's not enough. It's the Jews, gas the Jews. Why is it around the world that there are Islamic protests raging against the Jews? Because the Jews worldwide are guilty. The Jews worldwide are demonic. That's the perception. Of course, there are other Muslims that you would say they're maybe not true Muslims. And they'll say, we don't believe in this, and we want peace and cordial relations and things like that. But if you're going to be hardcore, this is hardcore, isn't it?
Yeah. And Una in the community chat here says, then he claimed the Jews were turned into rats. His proof, they won't drink camel milk, but will drink sheep's milk. And I actually know what this passage is about. I even have it here. So this is Sahih Muslim. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, a group of Israelites were lost. Nobody knows what they did, but I do not see them except that they were cursed and transformed into mouses or rats. For if you put the milk of a she-camel in front of a mouse or a rat, it will not drink it. But if the milk of a sheep is put in front of it, it will drink it. So this is actually Muhammad performing a scientific experiment to see that these rats were actually Jews that Allah had transformed into rats. He says, look, the rats will keep Jewish dietary restrictions. They won't drink camel milk, but they'll drink sheep's milk. And so this is the Prophet of Islam explaining to his followers how you can spot and realize that Jews were transformed into rats. And this sort of ties together with calling Jews and Christians the worst of creatures. Of course, you have harsher passages in the Quran, like Surah 5, verse 82, where this was in Muhammad's transitional period, because when Muhammad started off in Mecca, he really seemed to think that it's Muslims, Jews, and Christians all together united, and they're going to be united against the polytheists. The people of the book are going to be united with Muhammad's followers, and everyone's going to be united against polytheism. And he moved to Medina, and the Jews rejected him as a prophet. And then his message changed to, well, it's Muslims and Christians together against Jews and polytheists. And so you get sort of 582 during this period, where he says the strongest in enmity to the believers, you will find the Jews and the polytheists. And then he says, but nearest in love will you find the Christians. And of course, later on, the Christians rejected him as well. And then it became Surah 9, verse 29, fight those who do not believe in Allah, and specifically refers to Jews and Christians there as people who have to be subjugated until we pay tribute money. But it is interesting that Muhammad starts off with favorable views, because this has happened various times in history. Even Martin Luther, when he started off, yes, he had he had a very favorable view of Jews, and thought that it was just this false gospel that they'd been presented with, and their treatment by the Catholic Church that was keeping them away, and that once they saw the true gospel, then they were going to convert. And when they didn't, he started railing against them too. And so there seems to be this pattern of, hey, I can win over the Jews now, and well, when I don't, now they're enemy number one.
Yeah, when you mentioned rats, so I'm looking at a text. It's April 2002. Sheikh Mohammed Said Tantawi in Saudi Arabia. So this is an older quote, but it's representative. So he's imam and preacher at the Al-Haram Mosque, the most important mosque in Mecca. In his sermon, he beseeches Allah to annihilate the Jews. He urges the Arabs to give up peace initiatives with them because, quote, they are the scum of the human race, the rats of the world, the violators of pacts and agreements, the murderers of the prophets, and the offspring of apes and pigs. Read history. You will understand that the Jews of yesterday are the evil fathers of the Jews of today, who are evil offspring, infidels, distorters of others' words, calf worshippers, prophet murderers, prophecy deniers, the scum of the human race, whom Allah cursed and turned into apes and pigs. These are the Jews, an ongoing continuum of deceit, obstinacy, licentiousness, evil, and corruption. So let's say that you grow up with some of these traditions. You either hear them directly, or it's just kind of like folklore, and the way things are just quoted, in your family or in the mosque. Then you grow up in Gaza. So the median age of people in Gaza is 18. It's about 10 years younger than the median age worldwide. It's a very, very young population. Remember, Hamas has been in power since 2006. Once Hamas comes in power, Israel basically says, well, you're governed by terrorists who want to annihilate us. We've got to blockade you. So this is in response to Hamas. If you could imagine, the option didn't exist, but if you could imagine a leader who said, look, we're here. Let's be realists. Israel's our neighbor. They're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. Let's work together. They could literally be prospering. They could be thriving. I know it's a pipe dream, but that would have been the alternative with Hamas coming into power. So now Israel does clamp down, and there are a lot of restrictions and all of this. Hamas terrorist attack, Israel bombs. You grow up there living in Gaza. Now it's confirmed to you. Look at how evil Israel is. They're monsters. Look at what they're doing to us. They're bombing our cities. And then you're not hearing that this is a righteous reaction and retaliation against what terrorists have done. You grow up in school And you have texts like this. You go to camps where you train to be martyrs. I mean, this is all on video. You can see things. If you go to palwatch.org or memorytv.org, where you can actually listen to the sermons that are preached or read the texts from different parts of the Islamic world. This is all going on. Then state TV has a certain narrative continuously. So it's this horrific, vicious cycle, this self-confirming vicious cycle. And there has to be divine intervention. But I don't see an earthly solution that gets us out of the cycle.
Yeah, that is the thing. It's like if you have two sides and one side wants to exterminate the other side, wants to completely wipe them out. All this talk of building bridges and so on. It's like, how do you actually think that's going to work here? One side wants to, and keep in mind, not everyone on that side, but you have enough people on one side who want to completely exterminate the other side, that this becomes almost an unsolvable problem. Because if one side wants to exterminate the other, then, well, it seems the only way that stops. So it either goes on forever. It just goes on forever with this cycle of back and forth, or one side is actually successful and exterminates the other. And then, of course, if one side actually was successful and exterminated the other, I guess that would technically end that conflict. But it just seems there is a pretty straightforward way out. That it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. It would be if the people of Palestine just completely repudiated the leaders who want terrorism and so on, and then kept them out of power, and then had stability long enough to where Israel realized, okay, they're not trying to kill us anymore. Seems like that would move forward. Just doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
And part of the vicious cycle now is that Israel is going further and further right in reaction to this. I got a call from someone today, a former ultra-Orthodox Jew, and calls my show fairly regularly. Still, he's a Jewish seeker. He's interested in Yeshua, but he doesn't know what he believes or can believe. And he was saying, look, he was one of the ones that was left wing, and he was the one who argued, we have to change our policies. He goes, but now we just have to have revenge. And others are saying the same thing. It's like Israel can never allow anything like this to happen again. So again, the pipe dream is that the violence, the head is chopped off, the other heads are chopped off, meaning those that are inciting the violence and provoking the violence, so they don't have the ability to raise their head. And then somehow Muslim leaders, moderate Arab leaders, Muslim leaders working with Israel come in to rebuild Gaza and to say, look, let's give you education, let's give you benefits, let's give you a future, let's give you a hope. We're not the people you think we are. But again, in this world, and knowing the radical ideology behind it, that's one of the big problems. This is not just politically driven, this is religiously driven. Hamas rose up as an alternative to the more secular PLO and Palestinian Authority and Fatah. They weren't devoted enough as Muslims. So this is a religiously based movement. And the other hope, just like you have in Iran, there is a massive reaction against the Islamic leadership. And not only is the church in Iran growing perhaps faster than any other church in the world underground, but you just have large numbers of Iranians. I was with two former Muslims this past Sunday, and they were telling me what's happening in Iran and the high percentage of atheists among young people and those who in secret are not living like Muslims at all. It wouldn't take much to topple the government. But it seems that within Gaza, as much as it's oppressive and Sharia law and all of that, that there's not this undercurrent of pushing back. Maybe this will turn the tide. Maybe people will say, what are we doing? And the human part will rise up. And then a less extreme form of Islam will be discovered by the people. But it's a very difficult situation. And it's one in which, yes, as a Jewish person, it's mind-boggling what happened in Israel, and the intentionality of the atrocities is what sets this apart. But these are all human beings there that we care about, and it's a horrific thing that never had to happen. If you think of it, if the Muslim leadership, the Arab leadership in 1937 had accepted the offer of the Peel Commission, which was the great majority of the land would be theirs and a small portion for the Jews, the Jewish leadership reluctantly accepted it. The Arab leadership said no. Well, they would have had a two-state solution with no problem, to the tremendous advantage of the Arabs. Then in 1947, the petition plan. Once again, Arab leadership said no. Ephraim Karsh, in his book Palestine Betrayed, goes into the actual documents and the quotes where here are the opportunities. They said, no, we will annihilate Israel. And when we push them in the sea, then you've got the whole land. So those who argue for a two-state solution, it was refused by Arab leadership decades ago, to the ongoing harm of the people. And then the surrounding Arab nations, rather than repatriate, okay, we've got all these refugees, we'll take them in. There are roughly 800,000 refugees caused by 1947-8 events. So they had to flee from all the surrounding nations in which they lived, the Muslim nations in which they lived. They had to flee. Well, they were absorbed in Israel. Some came to America, Canada, other places. But the Arab League in the 50s said, we're not going to take in any of the Palestinian refugees. That's why within Gaza, there are Palestinian refugee camps. Within the West Bank, there are Palestinian refugee camps. You can go to Syria. You can go to Lebanon. And there are Palestinian refugee camps. Why? Because if you can keep the refugee crisis as an ongoing issue, you now make Israel look bad for the whole world. And this is a plan. It's documented. It's well known.
So everyone has the Palestinians are just being used by a lot of people, and people who aren't really interested in doing anything to deal with their suffering.
Exactly.
People who are only making it worse as part of an ongoing agenda. Now, you referred to, I just want to quote a couple more passages along the lines, because you referred to the religious motivation, which is that's the part that makes a solution look almost impossible. Because if this were just a political, political fight or war, something like that between two groups, you'd think you can negotiate some sort of peace. When it is religiously motivated, one calls for the extermination of the other side, but also just abhorrent. The idea is abhorrent of having this group possessing anything or possessing any sort of power. That you wonder. It's almost like you'd have to drop part of your religion in order to actually seek peace with the Jews. So one of the interesting things is, I mean, Muhammad's change in perspective happened with the Jews, happened over a period of 10 years. So this all happens over a period of 10 years. He goes to Medina and he thinks the Jews are going to be on his side. And over the next 10 years, by the end of the 10 years, he's calling for his future followers to completely exterminate them. So it's interesting. You have passages on how quickly Muhammad was to call for the destruction of the Jews, and on what basis. So here's an example. So this is Sahih Muslim. The messenger of Allah said, "Let Allah destroy the Jews." So he's calling for the destruction of an entire group of people. For they have taken the graves of their apostles as places of worship. So, hey, why do the Jews need to be completely wiped out? He gives other reasons in other places, like in Surah 9, verse 30, where he says that the Jews take Ezra as the son of Allah, which I've never been able to find anywhere. But notice it's just, hey, they take the graves of their apostles as places of worship, therefore they need to be destroyed. And as he got more hostile, even during his lifetime, you have let's see. So this is Sahih Muslim. He heard the messenger of Allah say, "I shall certainly expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula until I leave only Muslims there." Why I find this interesting is, like, the standard narrative that you hear about the situation in Palestine is some Jews came and pushed everyone off their land. And not what happened. But look, this is Muhammad actually just saying, hey, we're going to push these people off land that they've been living on for centuries, because I want my population completely in control and don't want any sort of interference. And so what Muslims are even claiming that the Jews did in Israel, it's exactly what Muhammad did when he rose to power. He said, this is what we're going to do. And then as you've already mentioned, the reason this passage is so important here is because this is actually included in the charter of Hamas. But the
Yes.
messenger, yeah. So the messenger of Allah said, this is Sahih Muslim. The messenger of Allah said, the hour will not begin until the Muslims fight the Jews, and the Muslims will kill them until a Jew hides behind a rock or a tree, and the rock or tree will say, "O Muslim, O slave of Allah, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him. Come and kill him." So it's like nature itself is so horrified at the thought of Jews that nature itself is going to work with the Muslims in exterminating the Jews. And Hamas puts that and says, hey, yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is part of our ongoing political agenda.
Yeah. And remember, terrorists incite terror. So the the fact that terror has been incited, the fact that these horrific images are circulating, that is mighty Islam, that exposes the weakness of Israel, the weakness of the Jews. I'm just looking at quotes from contemporary Islamic leaders of these various terrorist groups saying that the idea that the Jews were so strong, Israel was so, it's just an illusion. So this is one of these things, that makes history. What's really sick, really, really sick, is when I say it makes history in radical Islamic lore. Look at this. Look at what we did. Look at the blood. Look at the gore. But when you have the Students of Justice for Palestine, which is a large collaboration of groups on college campuses across America, calling this a historic win. Oh, yeah. Beheading of babies and children, historic win. Burning of families alive, a historic win. Raping and abusing of women before you kill them. Shooting 90-year-old grandmothers in the head, a historic win. What kind of sickness, what kind of evil is that? When you have 31 different student groups at Harvard saying that Israel is completely responsible for that. What kind of madness is this? One of the most bizarre things, David, was people began to dispute. No, there were no babies beheaded. Oh, okay, so sorry. Of course, now there is visual evidence that there is, and even Secretary of State Blinken has seen it. But so no, they weren't beheaded. Oh, so it's okay to shoot a baby in cold blood. It's okay to burn a child alive. That's okay. I mean, it shows the madness of what's actually happening. But there's nothing like attacking Jews to bring up the madness of the larger society. It's a simple, sad fact.
And it's always what I always find interesting is seeing how people react when they find out that Muhammad has said something, that things actually go back to Muhammad. Because I don't know if you remember, this is maybe, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years ago. There was this document signed by a bunch of Hollywood actors, like big names, condemning Hamas, and it specifically condemned them for saying that they're going to fight the Jews until Jews are hiding behind rocks or trees, and the rocks or trees are going to call out, "Here's a Jew hiding behind me, come kill him." And this long list of Hollywood actors and executives and producers and so on all signed this document condemning Hamas for saying this. But then a bunch of people like me go, wait a minute, that comes from Muhammad. They didn't make that up. They actually got that from Muhammad. And then dead silence. No one wanted to say anything about it because, then you're an Islamophobe if you start saying something about Muhammad. But it's this weird thing like, oh, if Muhammad said it, then we've been trained enough in Hollywood to not object to that sort of thing. And so we're going to keep our mouths shut. But it seems to be something similar going on with college students that for years they're told, hey, you don't criticize anything to do with Islam. And now they're just programmed. And now the administrators and the professors are looking at this going, oh my goodness, these students are absolutely morally insane right now with the stuff they're saying. What's going on here? And it's like, wait, you guys created the monster. You're the ones who made this monster, and now you don't know what to do with it. Now he's wreaking havoc in the laboratory.
So you're not a terrorist if you behead babies, but you're a terrorist if you don't use the preferred gender pronoun. That's the real terrorist. I mean, it is the turning of the moral world upside down. It was 10, 12 years ago, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, in a major speech, and so a high-level official in the Palestinian Authority, quoted that very text. And I was looking for the uproar in the Muslim world. I was looking for the uproar. I even asked Palestinian Christians, why didn't you object to it? It looked like, how could we object to it? Well, exactly. That's the situation you're in. You say something and you're in big trouble. And you know what's interesting? A lot of people may not know the a lot of the criticism that comes against Israel and Israeli policies and Israeli treatment of the Palestinians comes from within Israel. It comes from the left within Israel. There are whole organizations. I'll have Christian friends who are anti-Israel today or anti-Zionist, and they'll point to all this documentation from within Israel, and I'll say, well, that's the nature of Israel. It's a democracy, and it allows for self-criticism. And if an Israeli soldier committed any of the atrocities that Hamas did, there'd be national uproar, there'd be protest marches and all that. I said, well, just show me in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, show me in Gaza where there is the public criticism of the government policies in its way, where the people live to talk about it. One of the more even bizarre things, I remember I live outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Some years ago, there was a pro-Hamas march, and it was organized by feminists and gay activists and others. Thinking, in Israel, I'm not proud of it, but in Israel, you have gay pride parades. You have all kinds of radical feminism in Israel. Tel Aviv voted a gay-friendly city, most gay-friendly city in the world. Let those radical feminists hold a feminist march in Gaza Strip. That's the last thing they'll do. Go ahead, have a queer pride rally in Gaza Strip. That's the last thing you'll do. And yet they are the ones siding with Hamas. It's almost this common denominator that the Jews are bad and that Israel is bad. And that when someone has to be demonized, when someone has to be scapegoated, it's always, quote, the Jews. To me, it points to the irrational and demonic nature of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that's so extreme that it becomes anti-Semitism.
Yeah, this is because you can legitimately criticize things that Israel does, things that they do in Gaza and so on, and that's true. I mean, being able to legitimately criticize a government, that's true of any government. Anything made up of human beings is going to do dumb things and make mistakes and so on. But yet there's this interesting obsession with Israel. Like, I'll always get it in some sort of discussion. I'll be in a discussion, there will be some sort of Islamic terrorist attack that has nothing to do with anything else going on. It's just a terrorist attack against Christians or something like that. And I'll say, hey, look at that terrorist attack. And they'll go, but why don't you condemn the Jews for this? Or I'll say, hey, look at what Muhammad said about this group, which provides the justification for this massacre that just took place. And I'll instantly get the response, but what about the Talmud? Why aren't you talking about the Talmud? And it's like, so you can have legitimate criticisms of what individuals or governments do, but so I wouldn't call you anti-Semitic for criticizing something like that. But when everything that happens in the world has to turn into a conversation about or a condemnation of Jews, you're kind of showing your true colors here. That every discussion has to go back to Jews.
Yeah, and in fact, when you demonize the nation, when you spread falsehoods about the people as a people, the Jews or Israel, and when you completely delegitimize Israel, then that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So you know what's wild? All the time, I'll talk about, you can have fair criticism. We can discuss whether Israel today is fulfillment of biblical prophecy. I say yes, you say no. We can discuss that. You can say, well, I think Israel needs to change its policies here, or there should be a two-state solution. Or I don't like aspects of the right-wing government in Israel. I don't like some of them either. Ben-Gvir and others, I don't like these people at all being in power. Okay, that's perfectly fine. And then I said, but if you cross this line, then that's anti-Zionism to the point of anti-Semitism. And people respond, oh, you're saying I can't criticize Israel at all? So yeah. It's this mindless thing, but it happens with the Jews. Look, when you go through history and you see what Jews have been accused of, if you go back to 1215 after the Fourth Lateran Council in the Catholic Church and official documents saying that the wafer and the wine become the body and blood of Jesus. So communities of Jews were arrested, were tortured, were burned at the stake for allegedly kidnapping and torturing a wafer, because this wafer was now actually the body of Christ. During the time of the Black Plague, just because of Jewish hygiene based on Jewish law, less Jews percentage-wise, plenty died, but less Jews percentage-wise died than much of the percentage in other cities. Well, it's obviously the Jews who poisoned the wells. And you read the documents, they used a mixture of animal parts and elements of the Lord's Supper, and they poison the wells, and that's why not as many of them died. And people believe this, and there's all kinds of Jewish bloodshed. To this day, all you need to say in the Muslim world is the Jews committed sacrilege on Temple Mount. They harassed worshipers at Al-Aqsa Mosque. I'm having people tweeting me saying, well, what about the Muslims that they killed on the Temple Mount? If Israeli soldiers had killed Muslims on the Temple Mount in the midst of worship, the whole Muslim world would be in uproar. It's all myths, complete myths. You had religious Jews being a part of the ancient temple area where they could be, celebrating rites of Sukkot, tabernacles, and now the standard lie gets out. Just push the button, get the reaction, and then it becomes the smokescreen. And whatever happens, Israel has to be found guilty. The Jewish people have to be found guilty. I'm even dealing with Christians. Well, they're under the wrath of God forever. They're children of the devil. They get what they deserve. And I'm thinking, you're a Christian. You're a Christian saying that. But it's no surprise. It's sad, but it's no surprise.
Yeah, let's talk about Christians here. Along the lines of what you were just saying, I remember these stories where it was interesting because, as you pointed out, all you have to do is say it. You can make up some weird thing, and then it gets passed around without ever trying to verify anything. So I remember all these stories about Jews were training various animals to go do things in the Palestinian territories. There was also
some of the animals have been captured, the birds and the porpoises and whatever, the spies.
Yeah,
I don't know if they divulged anything under torture, but they're actually one of my books. I list all the alleged animals that Israel trained, the spy animals.
Yeah, and cats should be especially susceptible to waterboarding, I'm guessing. But you also had this story about the Jews were putting drugs in the sodas or the water or something like the water supply to make Muslim women more sexually aroused so that they start having sex and so on, so they become more promiscuous and so on, and that this is what the Jewish doctors were doing. So yeah, you have it's weird that you could just make up absolutely anything and it will spread around the entire world without any concept of, hey, should we actually investigate this and check it out? But so we have plenty of anti-Semitism arising from Muhammad himself. There is anti-Semitism on the political left, but also on the right. I've seen people like there's this Nick Fuentes guy and so on, and he's calling for Christian nationalism, and this guy really doesn't seem to have a positive view of the Jews. So it's all over the place. But as you pointed out, how should Christians view this? Because I have to say, because you mentioned Christians who would say, well, the Jews are under God's curse. I don't think, when I'm thinking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm not thinking in terms of Zionism or any sort of divine right to the land. I'm just thinking of, okay, you're a country, you have human rights, and one of your rights that you have is the right to protect yourself. And you're kind of in a really bad spot because you're surrounded by people who want you completely wiped out. And a lot of these people who want to wipe you out are people who only understand being crushed. They don't have a good concept of negotiating for peace and so on. That's not the goal. And so I'm looking at that as sort of, really, really bad situation. What can anyone do about this situation? But you do have these different perspectives within Christianity. So you have the perspective that, even no matter how many times the children of Israel rebelled or reverted to paganism or something like that, that God is going to keep bringing them back. And so you have that view. And so they would view Israel returning to its land as part of God's covenant. You have other Christians who would say, nope, you broke the covenant and you rejected the Messiah. But even then, even if you took that view, it doesn't mean, okay, you need to be wiped out or we need to regard you all as evil. It'd just be, okay, now you no longer have this privileged status of having divine rights to the land. You're a country like other countries. But you obviously have some thoughts on this. So what do you think? Yeah. What do you think is do you think there's a correct Christian view that this should be the position of Christians, or are there multiple sort of plausible perspectives
So
here.
let me answer it on three levels. First, just the humanitarian level. When something like this happens, you only have one expression. Oh my, this is absolutely horrific. These poor people. That's it. There's no, you don't get into, but they did this, but I read the Talmud, someone posts, yeah, but all Jews hate all Christians. All Jews say all Gentiles are animals. Like, oh, okay. You're going to come back with that. So the first reaction when you hear of the slaughter of any people like this should be one thing and one thing only: deep solidarity, deep pain, period. That's what human beings do when confronted with monstrous evil like that. That's number one. Number two, looking at it on a totally secular level, it was the United Nations which voted for the partition plan and put Israel back in the land. It was the Muslim Arab nations that refused it and said, we will annihilate them and drive them into the sea. So just on the level, on a human secular level, think of this also, that there was never this long plea for a Palestinian homeland. This was under the Ottoman Empire. It was part of Greater Syria, Transjordan, things like that. But there was no view that this was the homeland. There was no Palestinian state, no Palestinian flag, anything like that. But this is the eternal homeland of the Jewish people, just on a natural level, even putting aside what the Bible says, that every year Jewish people are praying next year in Jerusalem. Every day, Jews praying from around the world pray facing Jerusalem. If you're in Jerusalem, as a Muslim, you have your back to Jerusalem because you're facing Mecca, right? So this has been the eternal homeland of the Jewish people. Jewish people have always had a presence there. Late 1800s began to come in greater numbers, develop the land. Now more Arabs start to come in with economic prosperity. There could have been peaceful living together, except one side said no, that was the Islamic side. So to just say out of the ashes of the Holocaust, were 2 out of every 3 Jewish people in Europe massacred in cold blood, 6 million out of 9 million, including 1.5 million babies and children. In the country of Poland, where Jews had lived for 1,000 years, 3 million out of 3.3 million Jews massacred. These numbers are beyond anything we could fathom. Can the Jewish people have a country? Can the Jewish people be entitled to security? Could you imagine what America would do if we had this kind of constant onslaught of terror against us? We just wipe everybody out. I mean, that would be it. Okay, on a theological level, I accept that as followers of Jesus, we can differ on this. Obviously, this is not a salvation issue, but I want to throw something out to you. Does God say in Jeremiah 31, verses 35 to 37, that as long as heaven and earth endure, sun, moon, stars, that he will preserve Israel as a people, no matter what Israel does? Has God said that in his word? That's among other passages. Did not God say, I will scatter you in my anger and bring you back in my mercy? Just exegesis. It's speaking of this, the ones who were scattered are the ones who are being regathered. They were physically scattered. They're being physically regathered. When you get into Romans 11, after Paul says all Israel will be saved, he says it specifically of Jacob. I'm talking about the Jewish people that don't know the Messiah. In verse 28 and 29 of Romans 11, he says this: as far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies for your sake. So because of Jewish rejection, the gospel is going to the Gentile world. So these people I'm talking about, this Israel that's going to be saved, right now, they're enemies of the gospel for your sake. But as far as election, they are loved because of the fathers, for the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. So God continues to have his love on the Jewish people. That's the only reason we've survived, and that's why we're back in the land. A couple other things quickly. When God blesses, no one can curse. When he curses, no one can bless. When he shuts a door, no one can open it. When he closes a door, no one can shut it. When he smites, no one can heal. When he heals, no one can smite. When he scatters, no one can regather. We agree that our people were scattered under divine judgment. Well, who regathered us? UN can't do that. People can't do that. Jews can't override a curse. Satan couldn't do that. So the one who scattered us is the one who brought us back into the land. And if you're Calvinist, you just have to say, in God's sovereignty, we've been brought back into the land. And by the way, I'm not a dispensationalist. I'm not a pre-tribber. Charles Spurgeon spoke of the restoration of the Jews. The Puritans spoke of the restoration of the Jews. They weren't dispensationalists either. So it's God who brought us back into the land in his mercy. Ezekiel 36, not according to our deeds, but according to his mercy. And it's the prayers of Christians that have helped sustain us. Do Jewish people need Jesus like everyone else? Yes, of course. I've given my life to that. You know, all the books I've written, and the debates I've done, I've given my life to that. That's not the issue. But the one who scattered us is the one who regathered us, Who is it that's trying to wipe us out? Satan. And therefore I say, if you stand with God against the devil, you stand with God for the preservation of the Jewish people in the land. It doesn't mean everything Israel does is perfect. It doesn't mean everything Israel does is justifiable. As a friend, you can be a critic, but recognize it is God who brought us back to the land, and we are still loved because of the fathers. And remember, all my Christian friends, you stand by grace. We all stand by grace and mercy. If you want Israel to get what it deserves, don't ask for that unless you and I want to get what we deserve. And that's not my prayer. I want mercy, and I want mercy for Israel as well.
You mentioned in your in some of your recent articles, and again, ladies and gentlemen, there's a link to Dr. Brown's site in the description box, and I read 4 of your recent articles on this conflict, and you've pointed out that we should be just as concerned about the suffering of Palestinians as we should about suffering of anyone else. So, Christians are kind of in a different spot from everyone else in that Jews and Christians have a concept of everyone being created in the image of God and everyone having a certain kind of dignity there. And even though Islam has I can think of 2 times image of God, man being created Adam being created in the image of God is used in the Muslim sources. Doesn't sound like it has anything to do with what we mean by someone being created in the image of God. It sounds like that Adam was created in the shape and same size as Allah and then started shrinking. That's what it actually sounds like from the Muslim sources. But we have this we have this position in Old Testament and New Testament that human beings are created in the image of God and are worthy of a certain level of dignity. And Christians also have this concept that we are supposed to love everyone, including our enemies. So even as we look at people who, I mean, it's a rough situation. You could look at it and say, "Hey, Israel's got to do something." I don't know what they're going to do, but they are surrounded by people who want to exterminate them. And the only thing that seems to even hold groups like Hamas at bay is just being brutal. So, and then Hamas runs and then just blends in with the rest of the population. It's like, what are they supposed to do? And yet we look at it and say, my goodness, you're warning people, but you're still bringing buildings down. Yeah. And then Hamas is keeping the people there. And it's like, I don't know.
And then when the people in Gaza were celebrating as the corpses were dragged through the streets and they're shouting Allahu Akbar and spitting on the corpses and beating the bodies, that was part of what pushed Israeli leadership to say, we're just shutting off power there, because Israel gives electricity to Gaza. I mean, there are power sources there, but this is largely drawn from Israel, and Israel brings food supplies in and things like that. So it's not to starve the people to death, but it's to say, okay, there's a complete shutdown here. You're going to suffer because of what you were even doing as a people. But that being said, I have no question, as a Jew with friends in Israel, having been to Israel many times, and with the level of what happened, how it happened, the intentional attack on innocent people, and all the imagery, the videos, I have no question that I am moved much more by Jewish suffering right now than by Palestinian suffering. I have no question that if I was Arab or Muslim or had friends that lived in Gaza, that I would be much, much, much more aware of the suffering of the Palestinians. But as a human being and as a follower of Jesus, of course it concerns me. Of course it's grievous. And as you said, I've mentioned it in my articles. And people say, well, why do you rejoice over Palestinian children being murdered? I don't. And again, Israel's not intentionally murdering them. I've posted prayers saying it's going to get really bad. We need to be praying for mercy, for wisdom. So this is why we pray, because it's impossible. We don't pray, God, help me pick up this bottle, unless your hand is paralyzed, your arm is paralyzed, because you can do it. If there was a simple solution, we wouldn't need to pray for divine intervention. But, people say how to pray. I said, a lot of my prayers, God help, God intervene, God have mercy. And then somehow, and this is the mystery of all mysteries, God brings beauty out of ashes. He brings life out of death. The modern state of Israel birthed out of the ashes of the Holocaust. So it doesn't, for a split second, take away from the pain, the trauma. Israel will never be the same. Gaza will never be the same. Families will never be the same, scarred for life. The losses are the losses. They can never be minimized. And that lasts a lifetime. But could it be that the extremity of the situation and the level of suffering, again, just talking totally naturally, forget scripture prophecy, forget anything else, could it be that it gets so far that finally people say, why are we doing this? It's almost like one of these movies where you're the bad guy and I'm shooting you, you're shooting me, and then we're each shooting each other. It's like, why do we have to kill each other? Why both die? Could it be that it gets to a point where hope rises? And look, there's the old saying, it may be slightly exaggerated, but in general it's true, that if the Palestinians put down their weapons, there'd be no more war. If the Israelis put down their weapons, there'd be no more Israel. It may be a little exaggerated because they're peace-loving people on all sides, but they are not the ones controlling things, and they are not the dominant ones in the narrative. So if people could get to that point, Israel would joyfully live side by side and say, hey, you prosper, you do well, we're excited, economic trade, interaction, all that. Even within the settlements where Arab workers were hired and they had higher wages and things like that, and they're doing well by Israeli companies. Could something positive come out of it? Well, the old saying of Golda Meir that peace will come when you love your children enough. I don't know the exact quote, but you hate us more than you love your children. Peace will come when it gets shifted around.
Yeah. We're going to close out here in a minute, but what are your thoughts on Palestinian Christians? Because I've talked to a couple. I talked to one who was on the side of Israel. I talked to a Muslim and a Christian from Palestine, and they were on the side of Israel, but they let me know that they were a minority. And
Yes.
I talked to another Palestinian Christian, and he was giving me books on like Palestinian liberation theology and so on. And
Yeah.
it seems like the Palestinian Christians have a pretty negative view of Israel as well, which I've seen used to show, see, this isn't really a religious matter. This is just about Zionism and oppression and so on. But what are your thoughts about the Palestinian Christians who seem to feel closer to the Muslim than they do to the Jews?
Number one, I've met many former Muslims who are lovers of Israel. It's quite extraordinary. The former Shiite Muslims, devout. The man had made the Hajj twice, so going to Mecca twice for the pilgrimage before he became a believer. Then she became a believer. Then they met afterwards. One of the first things God put in his heart was the love for Israel. I was ministering in Germany, and these former Muslims from Syria came over to me, and they said, "We love the Jews, we love Israel," in their broken German. I've witnessed that. Many of my friends in Israel that work with reconciliation movements and work across different lines, they find many fellow lovers of Israel who are former Muslims. So it's very, very interesting. Something gets put in their heart. A few years ago, I spoke at the Christ at the Checkpoint conference in Bethlehem. This is a conference held every 2 years by Palestinian Christians. It is an overtly anti-Zionist conference, and I would say in many ways an anti-Semitic conference in terms of some of the rhetoric and the fires that are fueled. So they have at every conference a speaker come in who has a different position. And they said, "We're asking you to come in because we differ." I said, "Can I speak on anything I want?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Can I address radical Islam?" Well, yes, we said you could address anything. So I came in with tears. I came in with love. They knew that, but I told them where they were wrong. I told them where the theology was wrong and what they were cultivating was wrong. I went to every meeting they asked me to and tours of different things and sat with Palestinian young people and heard their stories. And I said, "I'm familiar with everything you're saying. Nothing you're saying surprises me. But number one, I found that the opening meeting the first night was a celebration of the Palestinian Authority and a celebration of the Palestinian flag. And when I got up to speak, I said, sadly, last night was more Palestinian than Christian." when I wanted to say, I called on them to renounce Hamas. And then I realized I can't do that publicly. I cannot call on them to do that publicly. It's not safe for them. That's the environment in which they live. So in many ways, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And there are those who spiritualize the Old Testament because they cannot believe that God gave Israel the land at any point. So the Palestinian Christians that I interacted with at greatest length were more liberal in their theology. I believe Christian, but more liberal in their theology. That's number one. Number two, they were gut level, had much more solidarity with even violent terrorists because they recognized their cause. They didn't like the violence. They did believe Israel had a right to exist, but felt that they were being mistreated. So what I said, look, if you could show sympathy for Jewish suffering, if you could abandon your replacement theology, I could get American Christians, evangelicals who love Israel, to recognize that you have needs as well, that you are kind of the odd ones left out in all of this, because they're mortified. Like, how could somebody, evangelical Christians, side with Israel? I said, well, if there's a larger narrative in which the Jewish people have been the victims, you feel like you're the victims right now and crushed down by them. But as long as you hold this wrong theology, as long as you have these sympathies that cause you to side with these evil Islamic movements, and as long as you don't show the sympathy needed for Jewish suffering, I'm not going to be able to get American Christian sympathy on your behalf. So it's a difficult thing. They really can't speak up and speak out. But I've told them Israel's not your ultimate problem. If you go to Bethlehem, for example, there was much more freedom of religion there before the Palestinian Authority took over. So I say we need to listen to them. We need to hear their concerns. We don't want to turn a deaf ear to it. And where Israeli policies could change that would help them, let's listen. But let us recognize on the large point, they're on the wrong side of the narrative. And I do not believe that their hard attitude towards Israel is fully what it should be.
And I actually think I have some understanding of the situation that they're in. It's a completely different context and far less. It's way more kind of watered down. It's not as severe. But being in prison, you're an inmate. You're alongside of, there are Christians there, there are Muslims there, there are weird groups like the Five Percenters and stuff like this, which is a more radical offshoot of the Nation of Islam and so on. You're there with all these groups, and then there are guys who are pretty decent guys in there. Like they did one stupid thing in their life and they got locked up for it. But other than that, they're really good people, and they're like career criminals and some like total psychopaths and really evil people. But you still viewed yourselves against the CEOs and the administration. And, the worst thing you can be, even worse than a child molester, is a snitch, like going to the administration and siding with them against your own community. So it's just this weird situation where you're lumped together with really evil people, and you view yourselves as more part of that community than these CEOs who are that's their job. They're coming to work. So anyways, it's this interesting situation, because what's weird is I still feel like that. I still feel closer to inmate population than I do to the administration or to CEOs. It just gets wired into you. I mean, I couldn't even have thought of going and being a snitch or something like that, because that's like a traitor to your group and so on. And so if I think being,
it's a good analogy. Yeah.
And I think, and by the way, when someone would do something, break some rule or mess with a CEO, if they didn't know who did it, they would crack down on everybody. They locked everyone down. We all get punished while they try and figure out who did what and so on. So they understood if people, if inmates cross certain lines, we don't know who did it. We just crush everyone for a while until they all learn their lesson and no one wants to do that. And so, it seems like a parallel situation, but much more significant.
And last thing, when you're in Gaza, there are hardly any Christians known in Gaza. That's in terms of genuine believing Christians. I mean, that because it is radical Islam, because it is more religious than Judea, Samaria, West Bank. So I differ with the perspective of these Palestinian Christians that I met. There are others who have told me, I've had on my show, Stephen Corey and others, that are strongly pro-Israel, and they say that the narrative is completely wrong that's being put forth, but they get persecuted for it. They get persecuted by other Palestinian Christians. But I do believe they're in between a rock and a hard place. I differ with their theology. I differ with their perspective, but they deserve our sympathy and at least give them a hearing ear in the midst of differing, because they are in a difficult position. And everybody, if you don't get my emails, we're putting out 4 or 5 new articles a week and multiple videos addressing this, many other issue. Make sure you go to the website in the link there, sign up for the emails or subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can continue to pour into you as well.
Absolutely. And one last question before we go. Since a lot of this does come down to religious beliefs about ongoing hostility and so on, you've debated Muslims over the years, and one of their last remaining arguments that they still use is this argument for biblical prophecies about Muhammad. It's interesting. Some of their most popular arguments they now acknowledge were based on deception. So they have the scientific miracles of the Quran. They now acknowledge, their Dawa guys now acknowledge that was absolute deception. They had this myth of the perfect preservation of the Quran, that there's not a single letter's difference between any two Quran manuscripts. That was exposed as a lie. They now acknowledge that that was a complete lie. And so they're kind of down to this Muhammad and the Bible, but you've debated them. So kind of a little two-parter here as we close out. One, you're a guy who you're an expert in ancient Near Eastern languages, and they use that in their arguments to argue that Muhammad's in the Bible. So is there anything that you found persuasive about their arguments for Muhammad in the Bible? And two, why do you believe that the case for Jesus is any better?
So I'll try to answer this in less than 9 hours. The first one I can answer in seconds. The last time I debated this was March 20th, I think, in London, with a Muslim apologist, Zakir Hussain, who had been challenging me for years. And we've become friends since. But I got up and said, it's really unfair. It's unfair to him. It's unfair to Muslims. I said, there's so many good debates you can have. Like, is the Islamic ethic better than the Christian ethic? Or, is the God of the Bible triune? Or, you can have those. I said, there's no argument here. There is no debate. And snippets of the debate were played afterwards. People said that argument will never come up again. The idea that when Jesus said, I'm going to send a helper, the paraclete, and that's Muhammad. It's like, well, he explicitly says the paraclete is the Holy Spirit. So I said, well, let's just go through all the verses about the Holy Spirit, and they were all filled with Muhammad and spoke in other tongues, or no one can say Jesus is Lord except by Muhammad, substituting Muhammad for Holy Spirit. And people were laughing. The moderator said, well, try not to laugh. It's hard not to, but try not to laugh. The Muslim moderator. So, no, it's actually sad. I've had many good debates on many subjects. My friend James White and I, we've debated Calvinism. I've had great debates with rabbis. Of course, I believe in my position, but this is one of those. I had another guy on the radio with me, Nasir Ahmed, who completely lied to get on the show. I mean, set up this organization website, completely lied that he was there with some peace.
Sounds like Nadir.
Yeah. So this was. So I actually felt bad. And I said publicly, I said, I will not ridicule you as Muslims. I know you're devout. I know many of you are serious. I know many of you fear God. I said, but I will ridicule these arguments. So if you go to my YouTube channel, Ask K. Brown, Ask Dr. Brown, and just type in Muhammad, you can watch the debates for yourself. The difference between trying to say that there's a word that sounds like Muhammad there, in which case, David, you're in the Bible over 1,000 times, right?
Maybe
Michael,
I'm a prophet.
Right, exactly. So, and Messiah is actually called David in certain places. But what I laid out, I said, okay, just look at this. I said, his birth is prophesied, the place of his birth is prophesied, that he has to come, die, and rise before the second temple is destroyed, that he has to be rejected by his people and become a light to the nations of the world. That's all prophesied. I said, how do you make that happen? How do you manufacture it? You've got a whole narrative. It's almost like saying, this is proof. I have proof of water while I'm standing next to the ocean and I'm denying the ocean. I mean, it's that. The other thing, as I said at the end, because everything was rebutted so easily, now closing statements, I said, let me just read this. I said, you want to see a prophecy? You want to hear a prophecy? So I just read Isaiah 53. I said, this is prophecy. This is God laying things out in advance. So it's actually, I honestly, because as I spent time with Muslims and some of them very decent people, we've interacted, kind-hearted people and ethical and all this, I actually feel bad for them with the arguments. I'm glad we can expose these things, but I actually feel bad because it's so pathetic and so impossible and such a misreading of the text. And you have to say, well, no, it is accurate, but it's not accurate because I'm quoting the text that I like, but then the rest of the text, no, someone else put that in, so you can't even quote it to support you because you have to undermine it in the same breath. And it's very, very
using that method, you could prove anyone is in any text, right? I could prove that I'm in the Quran using that exact same methodology of I'll take this part and that part's good, but anything around it that completely refutes anything I'm saying, that part is all has all been corrupted. But I'm thinking I'm thinking like Orthodox Jews probably would view your position as similar to the Muslim position. Like, how are you reading Jesus into the text?
And that's the difference, where we have comprehensive, in-depth answers and show that the authors of the New Testament as first century Jews are reading the Bible in very Jewish ways. And we look at large patterns, we look at types, we look at symbols, we look at specific prophecies, as opposed to here's something that sounds like a name somewhere, or here's something that if I now completely insert something back in that has nothing to do with the text. So it's actually a good argument to raise, because now we show the differences, the profound differences, the mountain versus the sub molehill. It's not even a molehill; it's an underground buried argument. It's apples and oranges, apples and elephants. I mean, what else can you say? So I love it if someone raises that. Say, oh well, let's compare and let's look at the Jewish ways the text to handle it, and on and on. And here's the other thing. Last thing. Is that these are Jews interpreting a Jewish text that was a living text in their day and part of their common community, as opposed to someone else, because the arguments, the Quran mentions it, but it doesn't tell you what, right, where Muhammad is mentioned. So another people in another place, unrelated to the people of Israel and unrelated to those scriptures, now trying to put their guy back into it. It's complete difference, as opposed to here's the Jewish Messiah born at this time, as a Jew, king of the Jews, according to the prophecies. But hey, listen, let the light shine. The more it shines, the more the darkness is exposed.
Amen. And so everyone be sure to follow Dr. Brown on YouTube and Twitter. Go to his website, subscribe to get his newsletter. Definitely watch his, matter of fact, I will add those links probably in a pinned comment, but your debate with Zakir Hussain, awesome. It showed how absolutely pathetic the Muslim arguments for Muhammad in the Bible are. But also, the first time I ever saw you, I believe, was that show called The Line of Fire or something like that? It had Lee Strobel.
Oh no, Lee Strobel's. It was his case for Christ. So Shmuley and I, Rabbi Shmuley and I did a debate for his
and that was such an intelligent debate. It was interesting. It was interesting watching that, because it just as Christians who do apologetics, we're familiar with Isaiah 53 and a couple of other passages, but you guys were on such another level, going into such so much detail about the prophecies and so on, that it was such an intelligent discussion. And so that's kind of the situation. It's like even having a discussion about Muhammad in the Bible just ends up sounding really dumb, but arguing about Jesus in the Old Testament, and you get a really awesome discussion. So yeah, I'll add links to all those. Encourage everyone to watch, and I'm sure we'll all have much more to say about the conflict as it unfolds. But remember, especially if you're a Christian, that you're to love everyone. We're to love even our enemies. That we are to pursue peace. And so let's do our best to be salt and light for the world. Thank you, Dr. Brown, and we'll catch you all next time.